Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I thought I was walking into my grandfather's final goodbye, but instead I stepped into the biggest betrayal of my life. My mother had called 3 hours earlier, voice trembling, as she claimed Grandpa Joe was dying and wanted to see the whole family one last time at the old estate. When I pushed through those heavy oak doors expecting tearful hugs and whispered memories, I found a sterile conference room filled with lawyers in expensive suits, distant relatives I barely recognized, and legal documents scattered across a mahogany table like weapons of war. My mother sat stone-faced at the head while my uncle smirked, beside a briefcase overflowing with papers, his eyes gleaming with something that made my stomach turn cold. The silence stretched like a taut wire before snapping. I scanned the room counting 5 lawyers, 7 family members, and enough legal paperwork to choke a courthouse. My mother finally spoke, her voice devoid of the emotion that had filled our phone call just hours before. "Julia, sit down. We need to discuss your father's will." The words hit me like ice water. Dad had passed away 6 months ago, leaving me everything in a decision that had surprised everyone, including me. His construction business, 3 rental properties, investment accounts totaling nearly $2 million, and the family vacation home in Lake Tahoe. At 28, I suddenly owned more than I had ever imagined possible. "What about Grandpa Joe?" I asked, still standing near the doorway. "You said he was dying." My Uncle Marcus chuckled a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. "Sit down, nephew. Grandpa's fine. This is about something much more important." The lead attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Mr. Julius Thompson, I'm attorney William Nash. Your family has retained our services to address concerns about the inheritance left to you by your late father." My younger sister Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding my eyes. She had always been close to Mom, but seeing her here felt like a knife between my ribs. "Julius, just listen to what they have to say," she whispered. Attorney Nash shuffled through a thick stack of documents. "Your mother and extended family believe you lack the maturity and financial responsibility to manage such significant assets. We've prepared documentation that would transfer control of these inheritances to a family trust managed by your mother and uncle, with you receiving a monthly allowance." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You want me to sign away my inheritance?" "We want you to be responsible." My mother snapped, her mask finally slipping. "Do you think your father would want you throwing away everything he built because you can't handle money?" Marcus leaned forward, his thick fingers drumming against the table. "We've been watching you, Julius. The expensive dinners, the new truck, that ridiculous vacation to Europe last month. You're burning through money like it's kindling." I stared at him in disbelief. The vacation had been a gift to myself after months of grief. The truck replaced my 15-year-old beater that finally died. The dinners were attempts to feel normal again after losing my father. "This is insane," I said, my voice barely steady. "Dad left me that money. He made his choice." Attorney Nash pulled out another folder, this one significantly thicker. "Your family has documented several instances of questionable financial judgment. College drinking incidents that led to academic probation. 3 different jobs in the past 5 years. A failed relationship that resulted in significant expenses. The evidence suggests a pattern of irresponsibility." Emma finally looked at me, her eyes red with unshed tears. "Julius, when Dad got sick, you weren't there. You were too busy with your life in the city to help us. Why should you get everything when you weren't even here?" The accusation cut deeper than any legal threat. I had struggled with guilt about being 2 hours away when Dad's condition worsened rapidly. My marketing job in Sacramento required long hours, and I had visited every weekend. But it never felt like enough. "I was working to support myself," I protested. "I couldn't just abandon my career." "But you could abandon your family," my mother said coldly. Your father built that business with his bare hands, and you think you deserve it because of some legal document. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a check. We're not unreasonable. Sign the papers, and you get $50,000 immediately, plus $2,000 a month for life. That's more than most people ever see. I stared at the check, watching the numbers blur as emotions crashed over me. $50,000 versus $2 million. $2,000 a month versus owning properties that generated 10 times that amount. They were offering me scraps from my own table. Attorney Nash slid papers across the polished surface. This arrangement protects everyone, Julius. The family business continues operating successfully. The properties maintain their value, and you receive guaranteed income without the stress of management. What if I refuse? I asked. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Marcus and my mother exchanged glances before he spoke. That would be unfortunate for everyone involved, Marcus said, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. Especially since there are aspects of your father's final months that might interest the IRS. Tax implications that could tie up the inheritance in legal battles for years. My hands clenched into fists. They were threatening me in a room full of lawyers, using my father's death as leverage. I looked around the table at faces I had known my entire life, searching for any sign of the family I remembered. Instead, I saw strangers motivated by greed, willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. But I also saw something else. Nervous glances between the attorneys, sweat beading on Marcus's forehead despite the air conditioning. My mother's hands trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. They were scared, which meant they weren't as confident about their legal position as they pretended to be. And that gave me the first glimmer of hope I had felt since walking into this ambush. The next hour unfolded like a master class in psychological warfare. Attorney Nash produced bank statements showing withdrawals from my father's business accounts, thousands of dollars moved in the weeks before his death. My stomach dropped as I realized what they were implying. These transfers occurred during your father's final illness. Nash explained, his tone clinically detached. There are questions about whether these funds were moved appropriately. Marcus slid his chair closer to mine, invading my personal space with practiced intimidation. Your father was heavily medicated those last few weeks, Julius. His signature on these transfer authorizations might not hold up under scrutiny. Are you saying Dad was incompetent when he wrote his will? I demanded. We're saying there are irregularities that could complicate your inheritance, my mother interjected. Legal challenges that would freeze everything for years, while lawyers get rich and the business suffers. My cousin Bradley spoke for the first time since I had arrived. I barely recognized him. The awkward teenager I remembered had transformed into a polished surgeon, his success evident in his expensive suit and confident posture. Julius, I know this feels harsh, but sometimes family has to make tough decisions. Bradley said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life and death choices. You've never run a business. You've never managed investments. Dad's construction company employs 43 people who depend on those paychecks. Do you really want to risk their livelihoods because of pride? The manipulation was expertly crafted. They were painting me as selfish for wanting to keep what was legally mine, while positioning themselves as protectors of workers and fiscal responsibility. Emma pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. This is from your Instagram last month. You're sitting in that expensive restaurant in San Francisco with that girl you were dating. The receipt for that meal could have fed a construction worker's family for a week. I stared at the image, remembering that night. Sarah and I had celebrated my promotion at work. The dinner cost $200, which had felt like a reasonable celebration at the time. Now it was being weaponized against me. You posted about your new truck on Facebook. Emma continued scrolling through more screenshots. $45,000 for a vehicle when Dad was lying in that hospital bed. I needed reliable transportation. I protested weakly, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. Marcus pulled out another folder, this one containing printouts of my credit card statements. We know about the gambling, Julius. My blood turned to ice. What gambling? Las Vegas 3 months ago. $2,000 charged at the Bellagio. Atlantic City last year, nearly $1,500 at the Borgata. Your father was dying, and you were throwing money away in casinos. The charges were real, but the context was completely distorted. Las Vegas had been a bachelor party for my college roommate. Atlantic City was a weekend getaway with Sarah, where we had set a strict entertainment budget. Neither trip involved serious gambling, but the charges looked damning on paper. Those were vacations, not gambling problems, I said, but I could see doubt creeping into Emma's eyes. Attorney Nash opened yet another file. We've also been in contact with your employer, Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. They're aware of your family situation and the concerns about your financial stability. My heart stopped. You contacted my job. We simply made them aware that you might be distracted by family legal issues, my mother said with false sympathy. They were very understanding about the potential impact on your performance. I realized the full scope of their attack. They had not just ambushed me today. They had been systematically undermining my life for weeks, planting seeds of doubt about my stability with my employer, gathering evidence to paint me as irresponsible, building a legal and social case against my character. Your supervisor, Janet Morrison, mentioned that you've seemed stressed lately, Marcus added with a smirk. Missing deadlines, distracted in meetings. She's concerned about your ability to handle pressure. The worst part was that some of it was true. I had been struggling at work since Dad's death. Grief made concentration difficult. I had missed a few deadlines and found myself staring out windows during meetings, thinking about memories instead of marketing campaigns. Bradley leaned forward with the practiced empathy of a doctor delivering bad news. Julius, we've all watched you struggle this past year. The drinking increased after Dad got sick. The relationship with Sarah fell apart. You've been bouncing between jobs, never quite finding your footing. These aren't criticisms. They're observations from people who care about you. We want to help, Emma added, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. But we can't watch you destroy everything Dad built because you're not ready for this responsibility. Attorney Nash presented the papers again, this time with a pen. The monthly allowance can start immediately. You'll never have to worry about bills or employment again. No pressure, no stress, no risk of failure. They were offering me a golden cage. Financial security without responsibility. The temptation was real. Grief had left me exhausted and uncertain about everything in my life. Part of me wanted to sign those papers and let someone else carry the burden of my father's legacy. But another part of me, the part that remembered Dad teaching me to swing a hammer and calculate job costs, rebelled against their manipulation. He had chosen me for a reason, even if I could not yet understand what that reason was. I need time to think, I said. Marcus's expression hardened. Time is a luxury you might not have, nephew. Legal challenges move fast, and once they start stopping them, becomes very expensive. You have until tomorrow morning, my mother declared. After that, we file papers questioning your father's mental competency during his final weeks. The inheritance gets frozen, the business operations halt, and everyone suffers while lawyers sort through years of legal battles. I looked around the table one more time, seeing my family transformed into adversaries. But I also noticed something else that gave me pause. Despite their confident presentation, nervous energy filled the room. Attorneys who avoided direct eye contact. Family members who fidgeted with their hands. My mother's forced composure that cracked around the edges. They needed my signature more than they were admitting, which meant their legal position was not as strong as they claimed. And that realization planted the first seed of a plan that would change everything. The revelation came from the most unexpected source. Emma, visibly distressed by the mounting tension, made a crucial slip that unraveled the entire deception. I just don't understand why Grandpa Joe had to find out this way. she said, wiping tears from her eyes. When he calls from Montana tonight, how are we supposed to explain this mess? The room went dead silent. Marcus shot Emma a look that could have melted steel, while my mother's face drained of all color. Montana, I repeated slowly. I thought Grandpa was dying here. Emma's eyes widened as she realized her mistake. I meant after he gets back from... Emma, stop talking, Marcus commanded, but the damage was done. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. Grandpa Joe is on a fishing trip in Montana. He's not dying at all. Attorney Nash shuffled his papers nervously while the other lawyers exchanged worried glances. The foundation of their emotional manipulation had just crumbled, and everyone in the room knew it. Sit down, Julius, my mother said desperately. Let me explain. Explain what? That you lied to get me here. That you invented a dying grandfather to trick me into this ambush. Bradley attempted damage control. The point is still valid, Julius. The inheritance issues remain regardless of Grandpa's health. But I was not listening to Bradley anymore. My mind was racing, connecting dots that painted a horrifying picture. If they had lied about Grandpa Joe, what else were they lying about? I thought about the bank statements Nash had shown me, the mysterious transfers from Dad's business accounts. Who authorized those money transfers you showed me? I demanded. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Marcus answered. Your father signed the authorizations. While he was heavily medicated and supposedly incompetent, the same man you claim was not mentally fit to write his will. Attorney Nash cleared his throat. The timeline is complicated, Mr. Thompson. No, it's not complicated at all, I said, my voice gaining strength. You can't argue that Dad was incompetent to leave me an inheritance, but competent enough to authorize large withdrawals. Those are contradictory legal positions. I walked to the window, my mind churning through everything I had observed. My mother's gambling addiction that she thought I did not know about. The frequent trips to Reno that she claimed were visiting friends. The credit card bills I had glimpsed during Dad's illness that showed casino charges. Where did those transferred funds go? I asked, turning back to face the room. Business expenses, Marcus said too quickly. What kind of business expenses require $30,000 in cash withdrawals during the 2 weeks before Dad died? My mother's composure finally shattered completely. She began sobbing, not the manipulative tears she had used earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered between sobs. I just needed to borrow some money to cover temporary debts. The truth hit me like a physical blow. You've been stealing from Dad's business. Not stealing, Marcus protested. Your mother is a partial owner of the company. She has every right to access funds for legitimate purposes. What legitimate purposes require lying to your dying husband and forging his signature? Emma gasped. Mom, you didn't really forge Dad's signature, did you? My mother's continued sobbing was answer enough. The lawyers were now actively distancing themselves physically, pushing their chairs back from the table as they realized they might have been participating in a fraud scheme. I pulled out my phone and began scrolling through my father's business banking app. I had been given access to the accounts as beneficiary, but had not looked closely at the transactions during his final weeks, trusting that everything was being handled properly. What I found made my blood boil. Withdrawal after withdrawal, each one signed with a version of my father's signature that grew progressively shakier and less accurate. Near the end, the signatures barely resembled his handwriting at all. $47,000, I said, reading from the screen. $47,000 stolen from a dying man's business accounts. I was going to pay it back, my mother pleaded. I just needed time to get my situation under control. What situation? I demanded. Marcus tried to stop her, but the guilt was pouring out of my mother like water from a broken dam. The gambling debts, she whispered. I owe people who don't accept payment plans. They were threatening to hurt Emma if I didn't pay them back immediately. The room erupted in shocked voices. Emma jumped up from her chair. What, Mom? What are you talking about? I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I got in over my head after your father got sick. The stress, the hospital bills, the uncertainty. I started playing online poker to distract myself and it got out of control so fast. Bradley stood up abruptly. I was not aware of any of this. I thought this was about responsible financial management. Attorney Nash was frantically gathering his papers. Our firm cannot continue representation if there are allegations of financial crimes. But I was focused on Emma watching her world crumble as she realized our mother had put her in danger through gambling debts. My sister, who worked as a teacher and had never hurt anyone, was being threatened by loan sharks because of our mother's addiction. How much do you owe? I asked. $83,000, my mother whispered. They gave me until next week to pay the full amount, or they start hurting family members. Marcus finally revealed his true role in the scheme. I've been trying to help your mother handle this situation quietly without involving law enforcement or destroying the family's reputation. By stealing my inheritance, by finding a solution that protects everyone, Marcus shot back. You're young and single with no dependents. Emma could die because of debts she never incurred. Your mother could go to prison for fraud charges. The family business could collapse under legal scrutiny. Sometimes sacrifice from one person saves everyone else. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. They had created a crisis through gambling and theft, then positioned stealing my inheritance as the noble solution. My mother's addiction had put Emma in physical danger, but somehow I was supposed to sacrifice my future to clean up the mess. Who else knows about this? I asked. Just the people in this room, Marcus said. We've kept it contained to protect the family. But I noticed several of the lawyers were already packing their briefcases, clearly planning to distance themselves from the situation as quickly as possible. My cousin Bradley looked shell-shocked, probably calculating how this scandal could affect his medical practice reputation. Emma walked over to me, her face pale with realization. Julius, I didn't know about the gambling or the threats. Mom told me you were being irresponsible with the inheritance, and I believed her because you seemed so distant after Dad died. I looked at my sister, seeing the fear in her eyes, as she understood the danger she was in because of our mother's choices. Despite everything that had happened in this room, Emma was still my sister, and she was innocent in this mess. But I also knew that giving them my inheritance would not solve anything. It would enable my mother's addiction reward Marcus for his manipulation and teach Emma that family loyalty meant accepting abuse and fraud. The real betrayal was not that they wanted my money. It was that they were willing to destroy everything my father had built, everything he had worked for, to cover up crimes and bad decisions. They were asking me to participate in erasing his legacy, to protect people who had already betrayed his trust. That was something I could never do, no matter what threats they made or what consequences they promised. My father had left me that inheritance, for reasons I was only beginning to understand, and I was not going to let his judgment be overruled by people who had already proven they could not be trusted with money or responsibility. But I also was not going to let my sister get hurt because of our mother's gambling debts, which meant I needed a solution that protected Emma, while ensuring justice for the people who had betrayed my father's trust and tried to steal from me. And fortunately, I had been preparing for exactly this situation for longer than anyone in that room realized. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, setting it gently on the conference table. The screen showed a recording app that had been running for the past hour and 23 minutes. Before we continue this conversation, I want everyone to know that I've been recording everything that's been said in this room, I announced calmly. The effect was immediate and devastating. Attorney Nash went completely white and began stuffing papers into his briefcase with shaking hands. The other lawyers were already standing, clearly planning to flee the scene as quickly as possible. Recording without consent is illegal in California. Marcus sputtered, though his voice lacked conviction. Actually, California is a two-party consent state for private conversations, I replied. But this is a business meeting about financial matters involving my inheritance, which makes it a legal proceeding. And since you invited me here under false pretenses to commit fraud, I think law enforcement will be very interested in these recordings regardless of technical consent issues. My mother stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. Julius, please, don't destroy your family over money. I'm not destroying anything, Mom. You already did that when you started stealing from Dad's business and lying to dangerous people about money you didn't have. I picked up the phone and touched the screen, sending the recording to my cloud storage account. This conversation, including your confession to forging Dad's signatures and stealing $47,000, is now safely backed up in multiple locations. Emma sank back into her chair, the full reality of the situation finally hitting her. Mom, how did you let it get this bad? But I was not done revealing what I knew. The really interesting thing about all of this is that I've known about the gambling and the theft for almost 3 weeks. The room went silent except for the sound of lawyers packing their belongings and heading for the exit. Attorney Nash paused at the door. Our firm is withdrawing from this matter immediately. Any future communication should go through separate legal representation. That's probably wise, I agreed. Especially since federal investigators are going to want to interview everyone who was in this room. Marcus jumped up from his chair. Federal investigators, what are you talking about? I smiled for the first time since entering the building. I discovered the forged signatures and fraudulent transfers 2 weeks after Dad's funeral. Rather than confront Mom directly, I took the evidence to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They've been building a case against everyone involved in the scheme. My mother's sobbing intensified as the implications sank in. Emma looked confused and terrified, while Bradley was clearly calculating how to distance himself from the family scandal. The agents were particularly interested in your role, Uncle Marcus, I continued. Turns out helping someone forge signatures and steal from business accounts makes you an accessory to federal fraud charges. Marcus's face flushed red with anger. You little bastard, you've been setting us up this whole time. No, I've been protecting Dad's legacy from people who were trying to steal it. There's a difference. I pulled out a folder I had brought with me and placed it on the table. This contains copies of every fraudulent transaction expert analysis of the forged signatures and documentation of the gambling debts that motivated the thefts. The FBI has been very thorough. Emma finally found her voice. Julius, what's going to happen to Mom? That depends on several factors, I replied honestly. How cooperative she is with investigators, whether she's willing to enter treatment for gambling addiction, and how much of the stolen money can be recovered. My mother looked up at me through her tears. I never wanted to hurt you or your father. The gambling just got out of control so fast and those people were making threats. I panicked and made terrible decisions. The worst decision was involving Emma in your lies and putting her in danger, I said firmly. Those gambling debts are your responsibility, not hers, and they're definitely not mine. Marcus was still trying to salvage the situation. Even if some mistakes were made, the fundamental question remains the same. You're not equipped to manage this inheritance responsibly. According to a man who helped his sister-in-law steal from her dying husband's business, I think I'll take my chances managing my own finances. Bradley finally spoke up his medical training, probably helping him process trauma more effectively than the others. Julius, what can we do to protect Emma from the people Mom owes money to? It was the first constructive question anyone had asked all day. That's actually why I came here today, even though I knew this was an ambush. I wanted to give everyone a chance to come clean and work together on a solution before law enforcement takes over completely. I pulled out another document from my folder. I've already arranged to pay off Mom's gambling debts using my inheritance money. The debts will be settled, and Emma will be safe. Emma's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. You're going to pay them off after everything that's happened here. I'm going to protect my sister from dangerous people, yes. But I'm not going to enable the gambling addiction or reward the people who tried to steal from me. My mother looked up with desperate hope. Does that mean you'll forgive me? Forgiveness and consequences are two different things, Mom. I forgive you because addiction is a disease and grief made you vulnerable, but you still committed federal crimes that hurt Dad's memory and put Emma in danger. You need to face those consequences and get help for your gambling problem. Marcus was not ready to give up his scheme. Fine, so you pay the gambling debts. What about the business? You still don't have any experience running a construction company. You're right, I don't. Which is why I've spent the past 3 weeks interviewing the foremen and project managers who actually run day-to-day operations. Dad hired good people who know the business inside and out. They don't need me to micromanage them. They need an owner who supports their decisions and invests in growth. I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I had been preparing. I've also been working with business consultants and accountants to create a 5-year expansion plan. The construction industry is booming, and Dad's company is positioned to grow significantly with the right investments. Emma leaned forward to look at the screen. You've really been planning this for weeks. I've been planning this since the day I inherited the business. The only thing I didn't plan was having to defend my inheritance from my own family members who were trying to steal it. Marcus stood up abruptly, his face red with anger and frustration. This is ridiculous. You're talking about running a business when you can't even maintain a relationship or keep a job for more than 2 years. My relationship with Sarah ended because she wanted me to sell the inheritance and move to New York with her. I chose Dad's legacy over a woman who didn't understand what it meant to me. As for jobs, I've been building experience in marketing and business development skills that directly apply to growing a construction company. I closed the laptop and looked around the room. The truth is, none of you ever asked me what I planned to do with the inheritance. You just assumed I would waste it because that fit your narrative better than acknowledging that Dad might have made a smart choice. My mother was still crying, but the tears seemed different now. Less manipulative, more genuinely remorseful. I'm so sorry, Julius. I'm sorry for the gambling, for stealing from your father, for putting Emma in danger, and for trying to take away something that was rightfully yours. I know you are Mom, and I want to help you get treatment and rebuild your life. But I can't do that by enabling your addiction or pretending that what happened here was acceptable. Emma stood up and walked over to me. Julius, I owe you an apology too. I should have asked for your side of the story instead of believing everything Mom and Marcus told me about your irresponsibility. You were scared and grieving and manipulated by people you trusted, I replied. I don't blame you for any of this. Marcus was not finished fighting. Even if you pay the gambling debts and save your precious sister, you still haven't addressed the real issue. Your mother will go to prison for fraud, the family name will be destroyed, and the business will suffer when the scandal becomes public. Actually, that brings me to the second reason I came here today, I said, reaching for my phone again. I wanted everyone to hear what I've arranged before federal agents take over the situation completely. I touched the screen and held the phone to my ear. After 2 rings, a professional voice answered. Special Agent Sarah Koslow, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Agent Koslow, this is Julius Thompson. I'm at the family meeting we discussed. The confession has been recorded, and I'm ready for the next phase. Understood, Mr. Thompson. We'll be there in 5 minutes. I ended the call and looked around the room at the shocked faces staring back at me. Like I said, I only brought one person to this meeting, but she's been waiting outside for the past hour, and she's about to join our conversation. The sound of car doors slamming outside sent visible panic through the remaining people in the room. Marcus rushed to the window and peered through the blinds, his face going pale, as he watched federal agents approaching the building. You son of a bitch, he snarled at me. You've been working with the FBI this whole time. Not the whole time, I corrected. Just since I discovered that my mother was stealing from my father's business accounts, and you were helping her cover it up. Emma grabbed my arm desperately. Julius, please tell me you're not having Mom arrested in front of me. The FBI is here to take statements and gather evidence, I replied gently. What happens after that depends on how cooperative everyone is and what kind of plea arrangements can be made. The conference room door opened, and Special Agent Sarah Koslow entered, followed by 2 other agents. She was a professional-looking woman in her 40s, with short blonde hair and the kind of authoritative presence that immediately commanded respect. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Special Agent Koslow with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're here to discuss allegations of bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy related to the estate of Mr. Robert Thompson. Marcus attempted to lawyer his way out of the situation. We demand to speak with our attorneys before answering any questions. That's certainly your right, Agent Koslow replied calmly. However, I should inform you that we've already obtained warrants for your financial records, phone records, and bank surveillance footage showing you helping Mrs. Thompson make several large cash withdrawals using forged authorizations. She pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus a series of bank security photos. In them, he could be seen standing beside my mother at a teller window, clearly visible as she signed my father's name to withdrawal slips. The handwriting analysis came back this morning. Agent Koslow continued. Expert testimony will confirm that none of these signatures were written by Robert Thompson. However, we do have fingerprint evidence linking both of you to the fraudulent documents. My mother stopped crying and looked directly at the agent. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. I committed crimes, and I'm prepared to accept responsibility for my actions. Agent Koslow nodded approvingly. That's the smart choice, Mrs. Thompson. Cooperation at this stage can significantly impact sentencing recommendations. Emma was trying to process everything happening around her. Agent Koslow, what does this mean for my mother? Will she go to prison? That will depend on several factors, the agent replied professionally. The amount of money involved, her willingness to cooperate, whether she enters treatment for gambling addiction, and her criminal history. First-time offenders who show genuine remorse and make efforts at restitution often receive more lenient sentences. I pulled out the document I had prepared and handed it to Agent Koslow. My mother's gambling debts totaled $83,000. I've arranged to pay those debts in full to ensure no family members are harmed by loan sharks. The stolen money from my father's business was $47,000. I'm also prepared to make a restitution payment to cover that amount plus interest and penalties. Agent Koslow examined the paperwork carefully. Mr. Thompson, this level of cooperation and restitution will definitely be noted in our report to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Marcus was not ready to give up. This is entrapment. Julius lured us here under false pretenses and recorded us without proper consent. Agent Koslow smiled slightly. Actually, Mr. Sanchez, you lured Mr. Thompson here under false pretenses. He was told his grandfather was dying, when in fact you and his mother were planning to coerce him into signing away his legal inheritance. As for the recording, California law allows recording when there's reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, which clearly existed given the prior evidence of fraud. She pulled out handcuffs and approached Marcus. Marcus Sanchez, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, aiding and abetting bank fraud, and attempted extortion. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus's arrest was swift and professional, but watching my uncle handcuffed was still emotionally difficult. Despite everything he had done, he was family, and seeing him led away by federal agents felt like another death in our family. Agent Koslow turned to my mother. Linda Thompson, based on your cooperation and Mr. Thompson's willingness to provide full restitution, we're prepared to offer you a plea agreement. You would plead guilty to bank fraud charges, enter a court-supervised gambling addiction treatment program, perform community service, and serve 18 months in a minimum security federal facility. My mother nodded through her tears. I accept those terms. I know I need help, and I know I deserve consequences for what I've done. Emma was holding my mother's hand, both of them crying, as the reality of the situation sank in. Despite all the betrayal and manipulation, watching my mother accept responsibility for her crimes was heartbreaking. Bradley had been silent throughout the arrest, probably calculating how to protect his medical career from family scandal. Agent Kozlow, I want to clarify that I was not aware of any criminal activity. I was told this meeting was about responsible financial management. We're aware of your limited involvement, Dr. Thompson, the agent replied. However, we will need a full statement about what you were told and what you observed here today. I looked around the conference room that had been the scene of so much betrayal and manipulation just hours earlier. Federal agents were now documenting evidence and taking statements. My uncle was in custody. My mother was facing federal charges. Emma was traumatized by learning about threats against her life. But underneath all the pain and chaos, I felt something I had not experienced since my father's death: clarity about my purpose and confidence in my ability to honor his legacy. Agent Kozlow approached me as her colleagues finished their work. Mr. Thompson, I want to commend you for bringing this matter to our attention and cooperating throughout the investigation. Your actions probably saved your family business and definitely protected your sister from serious harm. I just did what I thought my father would have wanted me to do, I replied. Protect the family while ensuring that justice was served. Your father would be proud, she said. Not everyone has the courage to do the right thing when it means holding family members accountable for criminal behavior. Emma walked over to me after giving her statement to another agent. Julius, I don't know how to thank you for protecting me from those loan sharks. I had no idea I was in danger. You don't need to thank me for protecting my sister, I replied, putting my arm around her shoulders. That's what family is supposed to do for each other. What happens now? She asked. I looked out the window at the family estate where we had spent so many happy childhood memories before gambling addiction and greed had corrupted the people we trusted most. Now we rebuild, I said. We get Mom the help she needs, we run Dad's business the way he would have wanted, and we create the kind of family he always hoped we could be. But even as I said the words, I knew the hardest work was still ahead of us. 6 months later, I sat in the visitor's room at the minimum security federal facility where my mother was serving her sentence. She looked healthier than she had in years, with clear eyes and the kind of peace that comes from finally being honest about your problems. The gambling addiction counseling has been incredible, she told me during our weekly visit. I'm finally understanding how I used gambling to avoid dealing with grief over your father's illness. I thought I was being strong by hiding my pain, but I was actually destroying everything he cared about. Dad would be proud of how hard you're working on recovery, I replied honestly. He always believed people could change if they were willing to do the work. She smiled sadly. I've been thinking about that a lot. He left you the inheritance because he knew you would protect it and use it responsibly, even under pressure. I tried to take that away from you because I was too ashamed to ask for help with my problems. The past 6 months had brought major changes for our entire family. Marcus was serving a longer sentence at a different facility, his cooperation with investigators having been minimal compared to my mother's full disclosure. Bradley had testified as a witness and managed to avoid any professional consequences, though our relationship remained strained. Emma had recovered from the trauma of learning about the threats against her, but she had also grown stronger and more independent. She was now living in her own apartment and had started graduate school to become a family therapist, inspired by our mother's struggle with addiction. "How is the business doing?" my mother asked, as she did during every visit. "Better than I ever imagined possible," I replied with genuine excitement. Remember how Marcus kept saying I didn't have experience running a construction company? Turns out the most important part of running Dad's business was listening to the people he hired and supporting their expertise. I pulled out my phone and showed her photos from recent job sites. We've grown from 43 employees to 62 employees in 6 months. The foremen and project managers are incredible, and they're excited about having an owner who invests in new equipment and training instead of just taking profits. My mother studied the pictures with obvious pride. Your father hired good people and treated them well. That was always his secret to success. The financial side has been eye-opening too, I continued. I hired a business consultant to review all our operations, and we discovered that Dad was actually undercharging for a lot of projects. We raised our prices to market rates and improved our profit margins by 30% without losing any customers. What about the inheritance money that was stolen? The $47,000 has been fully recovered through restitution payments and insurance. But more importantly, I've invested heavily in expanding the business. We bought 2 new excavators and hired a full-time safety manager. The insurance company reduced our premiums because of improved safety protocols. My mother leaned forward with interest. You've really found your calling in this business. I think I have. The marketing background has been incredibly useful for developing client relationships and building our reputation. We're bidding on larger projects now, including some commercial developments that could double our annual revenue. And Emma, how is she handling everything? She's doing amazingly well, I said, with genuine admiration for my sister. The graduate program is challenging, but she's passionate about helping families deal with addiction and financial trauma. She's actually working with some of the other inmates here as part of her practicum. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I'm so proud of both of you for building something positive from this mess I created. We're building something positive because you were brave enough to get help and change, I corrected. The gambling addiction was a disease, not a moral failing. Getting treatment was the first step toward healing our family. We talked for another hour about her progress in treatment, my plans for the business, and Emma's academic success. As visiting time ended, my mother asked the question that had been weighing on both our minds. Julius, do you think you'll ever be able to fully forgive me for what I did to your father's legacy? I considered the question carefully before answering. Mom, forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's an ongoing choice to build something better instead of staying stuck in anger and resentment. That sounds like something your father would have said. I think Dad understood that loving someone means holding them accountable when they make destructive choices, not enabling their worst impulses. He would have wanted you to get help for the gambling addiction, and he would have wanted justice for the people who were hurt by your choices. Even if that meant sending me to federal prison. Even if it meant sending you to federal prison, I confirmed. Because real love sometimes requires accepting difficult consequences in order to create genuine healing. As I drove home from the visit, I reflected on how much my understanding of family responsibility had evolved. 6 months ago, I had thought family loyalty meant accepting abuse and covering up crimes to avoid conflict. Now I understood that real family strength comes from protecting each other while refusing to enable destructive behavior. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway of the house I now owned, thanks to my father's inheritance. Emma's name appeared on the screen. Hey, big brother, how was the visit with Mom? Good, she's making real progress in treatment. How was your practicum today? Intense, but rewarding. I'm working with a woman whose son embezzled money from her business to cover drug debts. The family dynamics are really similar to what we went through. Are you finding it therapeutic to help other families deal with similar situations? Absolutely. It's helping me understand that what happened to us wasn't unique. Addiction and financial crimes destroy a lot of families, but recovery and healing are possible with the right support. Speaking of support, I have some news about the business expansion. Good news, I hope. Great news. We just won the bid for the new community college construction project. It's a 2-year contract worth $4 million, the biggest project in the company's history. Emma squealed with excitement. Julius, that's incredible. Dad would be so proud. I keep thinking about that too. He built the foundation, and now we're building the future he always dreamed of. You know what the best part is, Emma said thoughtfully. We're succeeding because we chose accountability and healing over enabling and denial. That's the real inheritance Dad left us. After ending the call, I sat in my driveway thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. 6 months ago, I'd been a grieving son who felt overwhelmed by unexpected responsibility and family betrayal. Today, I was a business owner who had turned a crisis into an opportunity for growth and healing. The inheritance my father left me was not just money and property. It was the responsibility to protect what he had built, while using those resources to create something even better. It was the challenge to be accountable for my choices, while holding others accountable for theirs. Most importantly, it was the opportunity to prove that love and justice are not contradictory forces, but complementary aspects of building healthy relationships and strong communities. Tomorrow, I would return to work managing the largest construction project in our company's history. Emma would continue her studies to become a family therapist. My mother would continue her recovery from gambling addiction while serving the consequences of her crimes. And all of us would continue the difficult but rewarding work of rebuilding our family on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and genuine care for each other's well-being. 2 years after that devastating family meeting, I stood in the conference room of Thompson Construction Company's new headquarters, looking out at a bustling job site where our crews were putting finishing touches on the community college project that had transformed our business. Emma walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a folder full of graduation photos. "I still can't believe you bought the building where they tried to steal your inheritance," she said with a smile. Talk about poetic justice. "The real estate market worked in our favor," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "When the previous owners defaulted on their mortgage, due to some kind of financial scandal, we got an incredible deal on the perfect location for our expanded operations." "Show me the graduation photos again." I requested, settling into the chair where I had once sat surrounded by lawyers and family members trying to manipulate me into giving away my future. Emma opened the folder and spread out pictures from her master's degree ceremony in family therapy. I never imagined that going through our family crisis would lead me to find my true calling in life. Dad always said that our worst experiences often teach us the most important lessons. I reflected, studying a photo of Emma receiving her diploma. "You're going to help a lot of families avoid the kind of pain we went through." Speaking of Dad, I have something to show you. Emma pulled out a letter written in our father's familiar handwriting. "I found this in Mom's belongings when we cleaned out her apartment. It's addressed to both of us, but she never gave it to us after he died." I recognized the envelope immediately. Dad had always written letters to us on important occasions, a tradition he started when we were children. This one was dated just 2 weeks before his death. "My dear Julius and Emma," I read aloud. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you're both supporting each other through the grief. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of legacy I want to leave, and I've realized that money and property are not the most important things I can give you." Emma leaned closer as I continued reading. "The real inheritance I want to leave is the example of how to love people while still holding them accountable for their actions. Your mother has a gambling problem that she's been hiding from me, but I know about it. I also know that she's going to try to access the business accounts after I'm gone to cover her debts." My hands trembled as I read the next paragraph. "Julius, I'm leaving you the inheritance because I trust you to protect it while also protecting your mother and sister. This will be the hardest test you'll ever face, but I believe you have the strength to choose justice and healing over enabling and denial." "He knew," Emma whispered. Dad knew everything that was going to happen. "Emma, your brother is going to need your support, but don't let anyone pressure you into betraying his trust. The money isn't the important part. The important part is learning that real love sometimes requires us to let people face the consequences of their choices so they can get the help they need." The letter concluded with advice that now seemed prophetic. Remember that family strength comes from protecting each other from harm, not protecting each other from accountability. I love you both more than words can express. and I'm proud of the adults you're becoming." Emma wiped tears from her eyes as I finished reading. "Do you think Mom kept this letter because she was ashamed of what she was planning to do?" "I think she kept it because part of her knew Dad was right about everything," I replied. "She just wasn't ready to face her problems honestly until she hit rock bottom and nearly lost everything." My phone buzzed with a text message from the federal facility, where my mother was completing the final month of her sentence. She was being released early due to exceptional progress in addiction treatment and her work as a financial literacy instructor for other inmates. "Mom wants to know if we'll pick her up next Friday when she's released," I told Emma. "Of course we will. The question is, what happens after that?" It was a conversation we had been having regularly as my mother's release date approached. She would need housing, employment, and ongoing support to maintain her recovery. But she would also need clear boundaries to ensure that our family relationships remained healthy. "I've been thinking about offering her a job with the company," I said carefully. "Not in a position where she would have access to finances, but maybe as a client relations coordinator or project administrator." Emma considered this thoughtfully. "That could be really healing for both of you. She knows the construction business, and she's learned a lot about financial responsibility through her treatment program. The bigger question is whether she's ready to rebuild relationships based on honesty and accountability instead of manipulation and enabling." "There's only one way to find out," Emma replied. "But I think we're all strong enough now to handle whatever challenges come up." I looked around the conference room that had once been a scene of betrayal and attempted theft, but was now the heart of a thriving business that employed over 80 people and had contracts worth more than $10 million. "You know what I've learned through all of this?" I said to Emma. "The inheritance Dad left me wasn't just money and property. It was the responsibility to prove that good people can succeed by doing the right thing even when it's difficult." "What do you mean?" "We could have handled this situation by paying off Mom's debts quietly, covering up her crimes and pretending everything was fine. A lot of families do exactly that to avoid conflict and scandal." "But that wouldn't have helped anyone in the long run," Emma observed. "Exactly. Mom would have continued gambling because she never faced consequences for her addiction. You would have remained in danger from loan sharks because the underlying problem was never addressed. The business would have suffered because dishonest people were making decisions about finances." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at construction crews who worked for a company built on the foundation of integrity and accountability my father had established. By choosing justice over enabling, we created space for real healing and growth. Mom got treatment for her addiction. You found your calling in helping other families. The business expanded because it was managed by people who made decisions based on what was right, not what was convenient. Emma joined me at the window. "And you learned that you were capable of much more than you ever imagined. That's the real lesson in all of this," I said. "When we enable destructive behavior to avoid conflict, we rob people of opportunities to grow and change. When we hold people accountable, while still supporting their potential for healing, we create conditions for everyone to become their best selves." My phone rang, interrupting our reflection. The caller ID showed the number for our biggest client, a commercial development company that had been impressed by our work on the community college project. "Julius, this is David Mitchell from Riverside Development. I have an exciting opportunity to discuss with you." "I'm listening, Mr. Mitchell." "We're planning a $50 million mixed-use development project, and we want Thompson Construction to be our primary contractor. It would be a 3-year contract that would probably require you to double your workforce." I looked at Emma, who was grinning as she overheard the conversation. This was the kind of opportunity my father had always dreamed of, the chance to establish our company as a major player in commercial construction. "That sounds very interesting, Mr. Mitchell. When can we meet to discuss the details?" After scheduling the meeting and ending the call, I turned to Emma with amazement. 3 years ago, I was a marketing coordinator who had never run a business. Now I'm about to negotiate the largest contract in our industry. "Well, Dad knew you could do this," Emma said with confidence. He saw something in you that you didn't even see in yourself at the time. The funny thing is, I almost let them steal it all away because I was afraid of the responsibility and overwhelmed by grief. But you didn't. When the moment came to choose between enabling and accountability, between fear and courage, between betraying Dad's trust and honoring his legacy, you made the right choice. As we prepared to leave the office, I reflected on how much had changed since that awful day when I thought I was visiting a dying grandfather but instead walked into a family ambush. The people who had tried to manipulate me were now either in prison or rebuilding their lives with appropriate consequences and support. The sister who had been turned against me was now my closest ally and business partner. The mother who had betrayed my father's trust was preparing to return to society as a recovered person who understood the difference between love and enablement. Most importantly, the inheritance that had nearly been stolen was now generating opportunities and employment for dozens of families while honoring the values my father had spent his lifetime building. Emma, what do you think Dad would say if he could see us now? She smiled as we walked out of the building together. I think he would say that the best inheritance parents can leave their children is not money or property, but the example of how to choose what's right over what's easy, especially when the people we love are making destructive choices. And that real family strength comes from protecting each other while refusing to enable behavior that hurts the people we care about. Exactly. Love and accountability are not opposites. They're two sides of the same commitment to helping each other become the best versions of ourselves. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the question I hoped viewers would consider after hearing my story. In your own family relationships, do you sometimes enable destructive behavior because confronting it feels too difficult or painful? Have there been times when you chose to avoid conflict instead of holding loved ones accountable for choices that were hurting themselves or others? The hardest lesson I learned was that genuine love sometimes requires us to allow people to experience the consequences of their decisions, even when watching them struggle breaks our hearts. But I also learned that when we create space for accountability and healing, instead of enabling and denial, we give everyone the opportunity to grow into stronger, healthier versions of themselves. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear about your own experiences with balancing love and accountability in family relationships. Please share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like this video if it provided value or insight into handling difficult family situations. I hope you'll subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and building stronger relationships through honest communication and healthy boundaries. And please share this story with anyone who might benefit from understanding that protecting people we love sometimes means refusing to protect them from the consequences of their choices. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to choose accountability and healing over enabling and conflict avoidance in your own relationships. Remember that real family strength is built on a foundation of honesty, integrity, and mutual support for each other's growth and recovery. The inheritance my father left me was not just financial resources, but the wisdom to understand that love and justice work together to create conditions where everyone can heal, grow, and build a better future together.